My mother-in-law, Jennifer, has a twin sister named Brenda who lives in another city. Brenda came to visit Jennifer one summer, and we all ended up spending time together. I wasn't familiar with Brenda before, so when I first saw her, I mistook her for Jennifer. But let's cut to the chase. It was a hot summer. Jennifer invited me, my wife Laura, and the kids to spend some time at her house. But Laura was bored with the countryside and decided to return to the city after a couple of days, leaving us with the children. Jennifer, as always, welcomed us warmly. She set the table, took care of everything, and didn't make me work in her vegetable garden all day, even though she had a lot to do around the house. A few days after we arrived, we went to visit Jennifer's sister, Brenda. They are so much alike that it is almost impossible to tell them apart, except in their clothing. Jennifer is more reserved, often wearing a robe or modest clothing, while Brenda is much more relaxed. She walks around the yard in nothing but swim trunks and flip-flops. I'll be honest, Laura and I were going through a rough patch, fighting most of the time. So when I saw Brenda, who was outgoing and comfortable, I couldn't help but take notice. She was attractive, with a trim figure for her age. They were both in their early 50s. Brenda was always laughing, running around the yard in her bathing suit, her carefree energy attracting my gaze. There was a beguiling confidence about her that made her quite attractive. As time went on, Brenda began to show me more attention, pouring me tea, making sure I had enough to eat. It wasn't anything egregious, but there was a spark between them. She smiled at me, her eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary. I was beginning to sense that there was something between us, and I wasn't shy about it. After all, Brenda wasn't my mother-in-law, and she wasn't a close relative, so I justified it to myself. What harm could a little flirting do? One afternoon, I decided to take things a little further. Brenda was sunbathing by the river, and we found ourselves alone. I suggested we find a secluded spot, and Brenda smiled, as if she had been waiting for the suggestion all along. There was an old barn in the yard, a flimsy little structure, but we had enough privacy. We managed to exchange kisses a couple times, which only fueled the tension between us. Eventually, we devised a plan. One evening, Brenda and I decided to meet in the barn. The day was unbearably hot, and everyone was trying to sleep in the house. I told Jennifer that I was going to spend the night in the barn to get some fresh air, and she didn't hesitate. I didn't realize that the day I was at the river, Jennifer and Brenda were arguing about something that led to them switching places for the night. That evening when I returned from the river, it was already dark. I looked into the house and saw someone sitting at the table. I thought it was Brenda, but it was actually Jennifer. Without thinking, I headed towards the barn and excitement swept over me. I stepped inside, and in the dim light, I saw someone curled up on a mattress. Thinking it was Brenda, I didn't hesitate. I moved toward her, and without further ado, things started to escalate. It wasn't until the light from outside fell on her face that I realized it wasn't Brenda. It was Jennifer. I was stunned. My mouth was open. I couldn't realize what had just happened. Jennifer looked equally shocked. We both hurried out of the barn, heading in different directions, neither of us knowing what to say. The next morning, the awkwardness was palpable. We crossed paths in the kitchen, and Jennifer avoided my gaze, clearly shaken by the whole ordeal. Brenda sat at the table with a frustrated look, refusing to even glance in my direction. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it They'd switched places without telling me, and now they were both upset with me, as if it was all my fault. To make matters worse, Laura suddenly decided to come back from the city. She said she was tired of being alone and wanted to be with us. Brenda, on the other hand, had become distant. She stopped joking. Her lightheartedness disappeared overnight. Laura noticed the change in Brenda's behavior and even scolded her for wearing a bathing suit, saying it was inappropriate when children were around. Brenda reluctantly threw on her robe, and her smile disappeared. When it was time to leave, the goodbye was not sincere. Brenda barely acknowledged me, and Jennifer was polite but aloof. The last time we sat at the table drinking tea, Brenda looked at me and then quickly lowered her eyes, her cheeks flushed. I knew she was still thinking about what had happened, about what might have happened if everything had gone according to plan. I stayed with Laura and the kids for another week, all the while trying my best to keep my fantasies in check. I caught myself looking at Jennifer a couple times, but quickly shook those thoughts away. I had to be careful after all. Things were already confusing enough,